Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another committee meeting of the Education and Culture Committee. I'm joined by my colleagues, Councilmember Nancy Navarro and Councilmember Will Jawando. We have two items on our agenda for today. The first one being an oversight work session with our Montgomery County Public Libraries. Before I turn it over to Councilmember Jawando, who is our lead for libraries, I really just want to start off by thanking all of our library staff, as well as Director Vassallo, for all of their continued great work. When I first ran for office in 2010, and Councilmember Navarro and I talk about this story all the time, I actually represented Olney then. And at the time, Olney Library was closed. And the number one issue that I got as I knocked on doors was about the reopening of Olney Library. Out of all the other things that were out there that county folks cared about, the reality is that libraries maintained that number one spot on those doors that I knocked on. And so it's clear that today, with the pandemic and the challenges that we faced in ensuring the safety and well-being of library patrons, as well as those who worked in our libraries, it became a challenge for us. And it was also one in which we heard from many people that they wanted our libraries to open. We know how much they mean to our community. And so we understand. We understand how important libraries are, why libraries matter, and that we're going to continue to do everything we can to ensure that these vital spaces remain safe for our library patrons, as well as for those who are working in our libraries. And so with that, I want to turn it over to Councilmember Jawando to go ahead and lead us through the first part of this discussion. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Chairman Rice, and good morning to everybody. Good to see you all. And I couldn't have said it better myself. I'm really excited that we're able to have this session to go over all the great and amazing work that the library team, Ms. Vassallo and her entire team, have been making over the last 18 months, but also the plans they have for the future. And it's a good opportunity to kind of assess what we've done, but also start looking forward. So we'll be joined by Director Vassallo and James Donaldson, I believe, the Assistant Director, Steve Capini, and Deborah Lambert from OMB. But just wanted to pause and acknowledge everybody because it was a challenging time. And libraries, we'll see the kind of usership and all that in the presentation, but we're an important lifeline and remain an important lifeline and for many residents as we move forward. Obviously, the online programming, service delivery will never be the same. And we're going to be able to, I'm really excited about the plans to continue to reach people through online, but also expand the physical outreach as well. So we'll hear about all of that. I know many of us, I'll be there and up in your district, council member, on the 16th for the reopening of the Germantown Library. We're really excited about that. One of our big crown jewels. And we'll continue to move towards full capacity and bringing services back online. So we'll hear about all of that. Let me pause there. Director Vassallo, I know you have a presentation. Unless Councilmember Navarro, do you have anything you want to add at the beginning?
Thank you, Councilmember Jawando. I just want to echo what you have both said. We know that this is one of our most treasured assets that also fulfills so many different functions for our community. And yes, it's been tough during the pandemic, but also all of you, just like many other departments, were able to adapt very quickly to retool and continue to provide some sort of assistance and support for our residents. And so just to express my appreciation to the staff, and as we are now in the process of reopening fully everything and hopefully coming back to some normalcy, I know that you will continue to innovate because the times really do call for change management, if you will, and innovation and being able to meet the needs of our residents. So thank you, Ms. Vassallo, and I apologize. Most of the time when I see your name, I want to say Vassallo, and I have to remind myself that it's Vassallo. But I want to thank you because I can only think about how you felt as you took the helms of the system, never thinking that you would have to then usher such an extraordinary library system through a pandemic. So thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank you all again for the partnership on virtual story time. We did 100 of them, and I think we may try to start them up on an occasional basis again, but really appreciated that. And I know you'll share more about all the work that you all are doing in that area. And I just wanted to give you a big shout out, in case you don't mention this, on vaccinations. The libraries leads the county as the agency it's most vaccinated. I think almost 92% as of last numbers I saw, maybe even higher now. And so thank you for keeping your colleagues and our residents safe as we continue to deal with the pandemic. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Director Vassallo, to make any remarks and go through the presentation. And unless Ms. Chen, do we need to do anything before I do that? Okay, thumbs up. All right, Director Vassallo.
Right. Thank you so much, and good morning to Chair Councilmember Rice, to Councilmember Navarro, and Councilmember Jawando. I would like to mention that the high vaccination rate, I think, in libraries is a reflection of the fact that libraries' mission is to provide valid, reliable, truthful information to all members of the community. So since that is the focus of our mission, I certainly would expect that my staff would be some of the folks who would understand the science and the rationale behind vaccines. I have a presentation that we use with our library board, which is part of the packet that you received. I'm going to go through it pretty rapidly. It just highlights everything that my great staff did for the community over the course of the pandemic year, which I guess we are not quite out of yet, but this really focuses on since we closed up until the end of the past fiscal year. So I'm going to get that underway. It's a slideshow and should not take too long. Let me get screen shared here. Okay, and can you see a slide that says MCPL from COVID to recovery? Okay, very good. The time period that we're going to cover is fiscal year 2021, so it's July 2020 through June 30th, 2021, and a few of the points will cover the immediately preceding months, but overall, the activities will be during that fiscal year. Okay. So to recap the implementation, in March of last year, a state of emergency, and we followed with closing our facilities to the public. There are 4 categories of service that I'd like to cover. The continuing provision of these services remained important during facility closures, perhaps even grew in importance because of the sense of isolation that many people experienced because of the pandemic. So we maintained our person-to-person services first and foremost during closure to the public. We'll look at this area first. In spite of libraries being closed, MCPL continued providing its traditional service of responding to information needs. During the latter months of fiscal year 2020, our Ask a Librarian service was the core point of contact for the community. A few days prior to the start of fiscal year 2021, branch staff returned to their locations, which allowed customers to return materials to the book drops. Direct telephone calls to branches also resumed. While MCPL supported communication with existing customers, the department also wanted to welcome new customers. To this end, within several days of closing to the public, we launched our digital library card. During the pandemic, this card allowed new customers to self-register online to provide immediate access to the many electronic resources available through our website. When the Holds to Go service was launched in July, the digital card would also permit reservations to be placed on physical items for pickup, and I'll talk more about that a little later. We also continue to provide our Books at Home service, which is a free service sending library materials to homes of county residents who are unable to visit the library because of a physical disability, health issue, or frailty. We mail items to and from the customer's home through the U.S. Postal Service in prepaid mailing bags. The second focus is our e-resources. Our e-resource service during the pandemic included picking up some new resources. Brain Fuse, very, very critical, and I know that Council has an interest in how we are supporting students as they resume in-person study in the classroom. Our Brain Fuse product is one of our major initiatives in this area. Press Reader, which gives all of our customers access to newspapers and magazines from more than 120 countries, and also the Washington Post Online, which is access to the digital version of the daily Washington Post. All of these very important to our customers. This slide gives you an overview of the increased use of some of our other resources. Our Overdrive, which is our main platform for our ebooks and e-audio, Safari Technical Books, Canopy, which is streaming media, Udemy, a self-paced learning resource, Hoopla, which contains many online streaming resources, and then the Washington Consumer Checkbook. Washington Consumer Checkbook made itself available to public libraries at no charge during the course of the pandemic, and you can see the increases in the uses of these resources in the COVID year. Then we had our programming, our third point. So COVID introduced us to virtual programming, and we had never done any type of virtual program. We'd never even considered virtual programming prior to March 16th when the branches closed. 3 days later, we held our first program using the Zoom platform. And as Councilmember Jawando knows, we increased the number of our programs over the course of the year until we were at a point where we were offering between 100 and 200 in-person virtual programs each month. We still are mainly running on a virtual platform, but are beginning to do some other programming, outdoor programming, which has been very successful over the course of the summer. And we will be moving to some indoor programming as we go into the fall. Our most popular program categories during the fiscal year were our story times. Over 53,000 people attended a story time. Health and wellness was another program category that really moved up during the COVID year. It had probably been about our 7th most popular program type. It moved up to 2nd during the COVID year. This is a slide that shows the times and days that we held our programs. You can, of course, review this in your packet, and the days and times of attendance. You can see that morning programs, I know that these programs here at 9 a.m. were story times, and you can see that the programming was very popular then. These are a couple of pictures of our story time. This is an outdoor story time. This is a story time. The librarian in the green shirt, Fran Kaplan, is the children's librarian at the Wheaton Library. We were able to partner with Montgomery Parks to hold story times outside in the playground area, and that's a picture of one of those. Another very important program that we had was our Summer Read and Learn. We continued it on a solely virtual platform during the course of the COVID year. Imagine Your Story was the program, and we did see successes even during the fully virtual. 58% of the participants indicated that they had made a positive change in their approach to learning and reading as a result of the program. Our physical materials services, we continued to develop our physical collection during the COVID year. We added physical volumes, and this slide gives you the total of what was happening there, but the lack of ready access to the physical collection, of course, was a challenge for us, and so we created the Holds to Go service. This service was put together by a work group formed of branch managers and line staff, and they did a fantastic job in getting this ready. It's a contactless method for borrowing library materials. The customer would reserve an item by using the online catalog. They would schedule an appointment to pick up. They would retrieve their item from outside the branch entrance or within the lobby while maintaining social distancing and wearing a mask. This service was offered until all branches reopened on July 6th. I will note that due to an interest from our customers, we are going to resume a limited version of our Holds to Go service, which will allow people to pick up materials outside the branches, because we have seen that there are still many residents who are reluctant to enter the library buildings to retrieve their physical materials. So we're working on getting that up and running. This shows the metrics for the physical materials pickup. We had over 377,000 appointments made. 94 of those appointments were successfully completed, which means that the customer came in and picked up their materials. So we served 354,000 people during the COVID year with our physical materials. And this shows our most popular days, Tuesdays and Fridays, for some reason. This slide shows the appointments by branch, and you can see that our top branch by just about 600 appointments was Davis, the Davis Library in North Bethesda, followed by Quince Orchard, then our larger libraries, Connie Morella and Rockville. We also offered a walk-in service for Holds to Go. Someone who did not have an appointment could call when they were outside the library, and staff would work to get the materials out to them. That was very popular at the Gaithersburg branch, and then followed by Connie Morella, Wheaton, and Alney. So this is a little slide that shows our circulation during the Holds to Go. We circulated 5.4 million either checkouts or renewals. There's a short list of the things that were popular, and then also non-book items. The express DVDs and audiobooks were also popular as part of the Holds to Go pickup. And you can see a couple of pictures here of how it worked. I know the top one is the Twinbrook Library. I'm not quite sure what the lower level one is. It might be Germantown, I'm not sure. But that's how customers rolled up and picked up their.
Director Vassallo?
Yes.
That is Becoming by Michelle Obama, right? Is that the one that is on that list?
It was. There were
Okay.
two of the memoirs, Becoming by Michelle Obama, were one of the most. Let me go back here.
Yeah, I remember I was looking at that list. I
Missed
was
it.
saying, had I read any? That's the only one, so I'm going to check out the others. So just if you're someone,
Right. Where the Crawdads Sing in the Dutch House are fiction. Educated, which is the story of a young woman growing up in a very restrictive evangelical household and becoming, were a memoir and a biography. And then Summer Supper and Edison are two children's books.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right. And then looking ahead for us, preliminary data for July and August show an increase in on-site library use, but we're not back up to our pre-pandemic levels. It's anticipated that our usage metrics will continue to grow in relation to community awareness of the resumption of library services. We do know that some people don't realize that the libraries are still open. We anticipate that the e-resources on the whole will see more use because a wider audience has been introduced to them. And we also now have a working basis for offering virtual programs and using those to complement the traditional in-person events. So our big picture to our recovery is to continue addressing services within a changing public library climate. And as we adapt to evolving health and social precautions, as well as to the changing informational, educational, and vocational needs of our community, we will build upon sustaining and growing these key service areas. And that is the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, I am happy to take them.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Going through that really quickly, and obviously I'll turn to my colleagues for questions. I just have a couple that I wanted to start with that I think is probably on the mind. The two that I get the most as lead for libraries is when will we start returning to in-person inside programming like story time and other. I know that's not the only, but if you could talk about that and where that is, and then I have one other question.
Yes, I had convened a work group to review literature, look at other library systems, and make some recommendations to us as to how we could best resume indoor programming. And I am writing a final memo directing staff in that regard. Because of the non-availability of vaccines at this point for children under the age of 12, we will recommend that we do not resume indoor programming or story time for that age group at this point. Our outdoor story times are very popular. I know that I had a metric from the manager, the Early Literacy and Children's Program Coordinator who manages the Noyes Library. They have held and continue to hold outdoor story times there, which have had great attendance. So as we watch the metrics and consider what is going on with the approval of vaccines for children, we are in a fluid state, but as our first resumption of our programming indoors will probably be things like our book discussion groups and other programs for adults where people have requested the ability to meet in person. Many folks do appreciate the ability to attend virtually. As I said earlier, there still is a fair amount of concern about attending or visiting a public library when you are not sure about what everyone else in the building is, what their status is. So that's where we are with our programming. We're also working with the recreation department to allow them the use of some of our facilities, particularly in the Long Branch area, to serve the community there. We had a series of very successful outdoor programs at Long Branch in July and into September, one of which attracted over 200 people, which for us is a really large number for a program. So I would say that we're moving forward cautiously. We definitely want to be sure that things are safe and that we're offering our programming in the best way for the majority of our community to attend.
Absolutely, that makes sense. Well, we're all crossing our fingers, myself included, for the vaccinations, and hopefully it'll follow the trend of our high school age students, our 12 to 16, which are, the numbers are through the roof as far as upwards of 90% and more. Second question, and then I'll turn to my colleagues, is Germantown opens on the 16th. I think it's the good thing is we're going to make sure everyone knows about that. I think it's also an opportunity for us to emphasize that the libraries are open and available for service, but we know that the hours are still restricted. For example, my kids are, wanted to go to the library yesterday. I said, well, not going to work. So when is, what's the thinking of the hours and switching back to, I know you're eager to extend, but just kind of where that is.
Yes, so we definitely want to work towards resuming our hours, our pre-pandemic hours, and we are actively working with our union partners on that.
Okay. All right. We will eagerly await that. All right. I'll Councilmember Navarro or Councilmember Navarro. Yes.
Thank you, Councilmember Jawando. I just had a general question regarding just some of the lessons that you've learned or some of the trends that you saw during the pandemic, and how will you, as we begin to fully reopen, address some of those issues. So, obviously we have been tracking very carefully the census data. We have seen where the growth in the county has happened. We have also seen that, our diverse population continues to grow significantly. And there's always been this really nice connection with our library system in terms of responding to those needs. I've shared in the past how before, when my 29-year-old was 2 years old, I think, I was a member of the Library Advisory Board, and I was brought in to help expand, for example, the Spanish language collection. It was very, very limited. Things have changed so much since then. And now what we're seeing, of course, is this really extraordinary mix of people who are fully bilingual. They are second and third generation, but there's still so many different countries represented. There is such a need, in my opinion, to make sure that we provide not just collections, but also services that respond to the needs of our current population. So I'm just curious, what have you had any insights or have you concluded, in terms of like, what would you do next to shepherd this transition, kind of using the pandemic, I guess, as almost parentheses to reflect on all of those things?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Councilmember Navarro. So there are a couple of things that come out of our work during the pandemic that we are going to take into account as we move forward. One, of course, as you mentioned, is the increasing diversity of the county. And we are working to continue to expand our offerings of things like bilingual programming. We have bilingual story times in Spanish and in Chinese. The other thing that you might find of interest is today is a very big day for us because we are launching our brand new integrated library system, brand new catalog called Aspen. And this catalog is going to be, the catalog interface will be easily translatable into 4 languages, Spanish, Amharic, Chinese, and French, so that we're responding to our community in that way. We have plans for more languages when we can get ourselves to that point. But that's one way that we are responding to the increased diversity of our community. The other point, of course, is, and this is a little bit of a hackneyed phrase by this point, but the digital divide. And the fact that we are offering a lot of our materials online, our e-resources and our virtual programming. And we know that not everyone in the county has available to robust broadband. We have been working with the county's TEBS unit department to bring outdoor wireless and extend it outside of our branches. We have a program where we loan wireless hotspots out of the library for a 2-week loan period so that people can have internet access at home. Those are things that we look at and that we intend to work on expanding so that we can increase our reach out to the community. Another item that is in the works, and my fingers are crossed for this, and Ms. Chen knows a lot more about this, is that we have applied for a grant in order to be able to purchase a mobile outreach vehicle for our outreach team so that they can get themselves easily out into the community to community events, to visit folks where they are, whether it be a community center in Scotland, for example. And we have received and approved from the state $100,000 for this vehicle. And we're working with the county's fleet department to get that underway and have something that will allow this 4-person team to be out and visible and interacting with the community where they are instead of expecting the community to come to us. So those are a few things that are underway right now.
Okay, my second question, given that this is an oversight session, so I'm trying to think macro and towards the future. What are your thoughts in terms of where we are headed? In terms of 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? I am a firm believer that this pandemic came to teach us a lot of lessons, and there are a lot of things that are never going to go back to the way they used to be. We saw that. We saw how quickly everybody adapted, and we also identified those gaps. You just described, a couple of them. But where do you see libraries in terms of the physical footprint, as well as the function, right? Because we also have seen organically libraries become more than just places where you go check a book or read a book. They literally become almost, community centers within many of our neighborhoods. And so just almost like from a futuristic perspective, do you have any thoughts about where do you see libraries as they currently stand, morphing, transitioning, evolving in the next 20 years?
Well, I think that you mentioned specifically the library's place in the life of the community, not just as a place where you come to get books or information, but a place where you come to exchange ideas with other people in the community. So a community center, a community hub. One thing that I have seen recently at the new Martin Luther King Library in the district is that they have space there for other county agencies to come in on a 6-month basis. So there may be someone from social services using the space in the library there in order to have a central location for folks to come. So partnerships with other agencies in the county, partnerships with some of our nonprofit and other community partners to use our buildings as a place that residents know as a location where they can get reliable, trustworthy information and access other services. I do see that going forward. Certainly the Wheaton Library and Community Recreation Center, the fact that we are able to have those two services together in one building has been just wonderful. We have strong partnerships with recreation. So, we do have our 21 physical buildings. It's not likely that they will be expanded upon, but adjusting the use of the space in the buildings is something that may be possible as we go forward with our refresh process. We already have done some of that in the buildings that have gone through by putting in more collaboration spaces, areas where community residents can meet. Another very important initiative that we are putting in place at our Maggie Nightingale is called Open Plus. This is a way for us to make our buildings open to residents, to our taxpayers at a time when they are not staffed. And so we're very excited to see how that works at Maggie Nightingale and consider applying that at some of our other buildings to make them more available. So I think, as you mentioned, the libraries as a hub for the life of the community is how I see us moving forward over the next 5-10 years and on into the future.
Thank you very much for that overview. I absolutely agree with you. I think for my colleagues, as we also navigate the waters of CIP budgets and doing whatever we can to strengthen our facilities, leveraging what we have is going to be so important, especially because I feel like the public has already pushed us to define what these particular assets, such as libraries, really could be. And it's something that's been happening for a very long time. We started talking about this a long time ago in terms of how people were beginning to use libraries differently and how they were becoming hubs in the community. And so to me, the pandemic literally has been an accelerator of so many changes, this being one. And it's a positive thing. I think it's a positive thing because it strengthens, in my opinion, the ability for us to provide support to our residents. And it's also very equitable because they are so well positioned throughout the county that anyone can absolutely visit it. I'll close by saying that, I always share that one of my very first extraordinary magical experiences as a 10-year-old in Rolla, Missouri, having just arrived in the United States with my parents for 2 years, was walking into the first public library because it was something that was so foreign to us. And it was so magical to be able to realize that, wait, you mean I can borrow all these books and read them back for free? This is amazing, and it played a really big role in my ability to learn English at age 10 because I was just taking in all these books. But it is an extraordinary asset that we have, and I know that in our county, that's why it is valued so in such an extraordinary way. So again, thank you, and I want to thank the staff once more for being so creative, innovative, and willing to step up and respond so quickly to adapt to this these very difficult times.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more, and I'll turn to Councilmember Rice. And I'm so glad, Director Vassalli, you mentioned the mobile unit. I'm glad. I was going to prompt you if you didn't, but glad you did that. And the hub mentality. One of the things you alluded to is the people that still want virtual programming, and something that we're dealing with. And churches are dealing with this now. Everyone's dealing with this. How do you get people back, realizing not everyone will be comfortable? And as part of that infrastructure development, I want to make sure you all have what you need to do the joint programming together. Even if you have an author talk, I personally think that should also be streamed. That should also be on Zoom. We should be able to try to do as much dual as possible. Maybe you're already doing it, but okay, I see you nodding. So, but if that's something I think it's not going away either, and it expands access to folks that can't physically get to the library. So just something to think of. You can comment on that, and then I'll turn to Councilmember Rice.
We are very fortunate to have the robust support of the Friends of the Library in Montgomery County, of course, and they've granted us a little bit more than $10,000 that we're going to be using to purchase equipment that will be able to be used for the streaming of our major programs, where we would have, for example, a well-known author in an in-person event, but then we would be able to stream it also out so that other people can participate, plus equipment that can be used for some of our outdoor programming. So we're working towards that. We definitely know that our major or marquee programs need to be available to the community in both ways, both in person and virtually. So it's a little bit tricky. I have recently attended something that was meant to be a hybrid type of program, and it was not a good experience. So I want to be sure that we do our due diligence and that we have a lot of trial runs so that we know we're offering the best sort of experience to everyone when they attend, either in person or virtually.
Yeah, it's not hard. It's not easy. It's a place that needs innovation because you can feel isolated. Council member Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Councilmember Jawando. And so, Ms. Fasalo, I just want to jump in because this is an oversight session. So I want to ask some questions about budget. Those are a couple things that are concerning me. So one, from a personnel perspective, where are we? I know that we do have front-facing employees, and so we had some additional expenses there. So wanted to understand that. I also understand that supply chains have been incredibly strained all across the world, let alone here in the United States. So I'm curious as to how that may affect your budget. And then also the collection, as production slows in many areas because of COVID, how that has had an impact on you, and have you been able to get the things that you need that are helping to support libraries and continue to support the patrons. So curious about those two things, about personnel, supplies, and as well as your collection.
Mm-hmm. In terms of personnel, we are robustly hiring. We're hiring right now for librarians. We have done a lot of movement allowing our part-time employees to compete and successfully achieve full-time employment. We definitely want to my staff has worked very hard during the pandemic, and I'm impressed with everything that they've done. So we're happy to be able to move part-time staff into full-time positions. Then we will be hiring outside. We'll also be hiring for Librarian 1 part-times, a senior staff member who will be overseeing programming, community engagement, and the outreach team. This is a role that I have been fulfilling over the course of the pandemic, and it is time now to get someone whose full focus can be on that. So we are moving forward with hiring. In terms of supply chain and challenges in obtaining materials, I'm going to ask Assistant Director Donaldson, who oversees collection and technology. I have not been made aware of challenges in that area, but perhaps he has more information.
Yes. So good morning, everyone. Thank you. We have been notified by some of our major vendors from whom we purchase books and our other materials that they are experiencing issues, both with regard to supply chain and the staffing of their own warehouses. To my knowledge at this time, that does not appear to have a cost implication for us. It's more of a delay situation. And so we purchased the vast majority of our materials from Baker and Taylor is the name of the vendor. And so what they said, for example, is that it's in our interest to pre-order as much as we can as early as possible, because if we don't allow some additional time to receive those materials, that we're going to experience longer and longer delays from them. And so our collection management staff is aware of that. They're working to navigate that effectively, but we don't see any kind of fiscal impact for it at all. It's just more a matter of trying to get the things and accepting potentially a longer delay for some on-order titles.
Well, I appreciate that. And I would encourage, just as they've encouraged you, to try and do as much of that as possible, because I've seen across a myriad of different industries to where those additional costs have now started to be rolled out to the individual purchasers as well. Everything from, from restaurants to a myriad of stores are now charging COVID surcharges And so we're starting to see that more and more popular. So whatever we can do about trying to avoid that and get as much of our stuff before some of those things may come out would be incredibly helpful. So just wanted to put that on our radar screen. I'm happy that you guys are on top of it in terms of having those conversations with your vendors. I know it's been something that a lot of companies across the United States have been challenged with, not just with delays, but also now with the increased cost. And so just wanted to flag that for us to make sure we're aware. And that's it for me. Again, just really want to say thank you, Ms. Vassallo, for your continued work. You guys know just how important you are. You've heard the stories from all of us as council members, but more importantly, you've heard the stories from the community. And they speak with one voice and very loud and clear that they care about their libraries and that they really want to see them continue to be great resources for them. So I'll turn it back over to you, Councilmember Jawanda.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. And great question. I'm glad you asked that. I did have one kind of oversight question. In addition, the collection fees. One of the things I've heard from some residents that I know we have for children, for example, we've I just want to make sure you can restate the policy. We're not going to be, there's no penalty if you return. But we do have an agency that calls folks because of COVID and because of the great success of Holes to Go, and now things are opening back up. There's probably a lot of people, I won't out myself, but that have books laying around the house that got sorted or lost or moved around. And so I want to know, one, are you seeing an uptick in collection activity? And then if you could just restate, because I know we do have an agency that calls on our behalf. My understanding is that it's not related to credit reporting, but that it's very similar to the agencies in the approach. And so I think just some people might be concerned about that, and we certainly don't want to discourage folks from continuing to use the library. So could you maybe just say where things are with, have we seen an uptick, and then maybe just restate our current policy?
Sure. So our current policy is that we do not charge fines or fees for overdue library books once they are returned to us. We have an automatic renewal system in place. The initial charge for most of our materials is 3 weeks, and then they are automatically renewed as long as no one has placed a hold on the item another 3 times. So customers can have an item out for 12 weeks with no penalty. At that time, they need to return the item to us. Now, we don't charge or assess any kind of library fees, but at a point at which the item is declared lost to us, and I'm going to let Assistant Director Donaldson give you the fine points, then we go through another process. And so I'm going to turn that over to him right now.
Sure. So we do send a whole bunch of notices ahead of that. And so we send notices before your materials are due if they weren't able to be auto-renewed. And then once they're overdue, we send a couple additional notices. After that, once an item is 3 weeks overdue past its last renewal, it is assumed to be lost. And then our software automatically assesses the replacement cost for that item under the assumption it's lost. And that's what gets referred over to the collection agency. The initial contact from that collection agency is just a letter that says, hey, you have these materials out. This is their collective cost. Please get those back to the library or you'll be referred to collections like officially, right? Now, as was stated, that even if that occurs, it does not have a credit impact on the public. But they will receive a notice saying that they owe whatever the dollar value of the materials is, plus a $10 collection referral fee. Now, the policy that we have in the spirit of our fine-free policy is that if all of those materials are returned to us and everything's cleared, we also forgive that $10 referral fee. And so if an individual in the community lost track of their things, gets that letter, if they bring back the materials that were assumed lost and they turn them all in, there's no late fees for those items coming back late, and then that $10 collection fee will not be assessed to their account either. And so that's a really important point to have. But we do need some sort of collection recovery tool to be in place for the few people who do try to abuse the policies, and that's who it's really meant to target. It's not meant to penalize any other folks. And so we've made all the policy changes we can to ensure it doesn't accidentally create a barrier for individuals who are just using the library well and trying to benefit from it.
Well, I appreciate that. And, you know, you might, as a suggestion, think of kind of a re-upping that policy communication, and I can help and we can help, because I think there's probably some people in that position. And we don't want to, you know, one of the best numbers that you highlighted was the 33,780 digital library cards that people have signed up for a library card digitally during the pandemic. We certainly want to keep people coming back. And if you could get back to me, if you don't have this number now, I'm just curious to know where are we at in relation to collection activity and how much is outstanding, and, you know, is it up, down, you know, and where we are. And if you don't have it right now, you can just, you can follow up on that. Great. Well, I don't have anything else. Ms. Chen, do you have any or anything else that we need to cover before we move on to the next item? Hey, you appeared. Okay, thumbs up.
Apologies. No worries. I just wanted to confirm with Mr. Donaldson that we won't be presenting your presentation today, but all the slides are in there about the launch of the open source platform. I just want to confirm that. Also want to flag for you that there was also a racial equity core team update report in the packet, as well as just some selected library statistics and performance stats as the last appendix. If you have any questions on that, we can get you more information.
I did want to mention one thing. When you have a chance to read the Racial Equity and Social Justice Report, it refers to a library grant application for the grant entitled Leading the Charge, Advancing the Recruitment, Retention, and Inclusion of People of Color Within the Library and Information Science Field. We did win this grant, and one of our team leaders for our Racial Equity and Social Justice team, Ms. Linda Kirby-Brown, will be attending this. So we're very, very pleased to be part of this national initiative sponsored by Hampton University.
Awesome. Thank you. And more awards to come, hopefully. All right. Well, thank you, Director Asalo and Mr. Donaldson and Mr. Capini and team and Ms. Chen and Ms. Lambert. I'll turn it back over to you, Councilmember Rice. I think we can end this portion of the meeting.
Well, thank you very much. And yes, thank you so much to our library partners. Thank you so much, Ms. Chen. All right, so we're going to go ahead to our next agenda item, our last item on the agenda, which is a work session on the Fy21 Montgomery County Public Schools operating budget and grant funds categorical transfer request. Today, we're joined by Yvonne Alfonso Windsor and Thomas Clausing, both from our Office of Finance within MCPS. We have Ms. Rodriguez Hernandez and Ms. Essie McGuire, who are here as our legislative analysts. So thank you so much. Always a pleasure to have you today. Colleagues, for your indulgence, this is a little bit different from what we normally do regarding categorical changes, but because of COVID and a lot of the pivoting that the school system has had to do, this requires us to actually have this action before us currently. And so really want to thank Ms. Rodriguez Hernandez and Ms. McGuire for coming together and presenting this packet that lays out some of the rationale surrounding why it is that we need to do what we do. I'll certainly turn to Montgomery County Public Schools for their presentation in just a moment, but did just want to highlight some of the reasons why we're seeing some of this instructional additional expenses, and remind my colleagues that everything from summer school instruction to a lot of the education equity hubs that were stood up within the school system, not just with the Black and Brown Coalition, more additional work for some of our teachers to help to stand up the robust way in which we were trying to do distance learning. All of those kinds of things contributed to additional salaries, much of what we see in a myriad of departments throughout the county. And so from that perspective, I don't have to remind Councilmember Navarro, who sat on the Board of Education and so knows all too well about why these things happen in general, let alone in a time like this when we have the COVID-19 pandemic upon us. And then, of course, I'll be curious to find out from some of the other challenges that we have just regarding supplies in general. The same question that I asked at the libraries, whether or not we may see some additional categorical transfer requests because of increased costs. I know that we'll talk about that when it comes to construction a little bit later in a different meeting that we'll have, but certainly one where I'm curious about what's on the horizon for the school system when it comes to some of these expenditures, and understanding that while energy costs certainly were a bit down when the schools were closed, and so we got some cost savings there. Now that we're back in, now that we have climate change upon us and we see these radical temperature shifts, how that is actually impacting some of the costs that the school system has as well. So those are some of the things that I just wanted to flag for folks as we go through the presentation. And of course, colleagues, if you have questions, just please text me and let me know so that I can put you in the queue. But with that, let me turn to Ms. Rodriguez-Hernandez and Ms. McGuire to frame the discussion, and then we'll turn to our MCPS colleagues.
Sure. Good morning, ENC committee members. We're happy to be here and have our Office of Finance attendees and participants, Thomas Klaas and Yvonne Alfonso Windsor, here as well to review the two FY21 categorical transfer requests, and one for the operating budget and one for the grant funds. And I'm happy to go through the packet to review these transfer requests. Unless, Mr. Klausing or Ms. Alfonso Windsor would like to start any opening comments, I will just go ahead and dive on it. Okay, so we are here today to review those two categorical transfer requests, one for the FY21 operating budget for MCPS totaling $67.7 million, and the second one for the FY21 grant fund request, which totals $1.7 million. As you mentioned, Chair Rice, yes, I would want to point the committee to the table on the top of page 2, where it shows the state budget category, the Board of Ed's fiscal year 21 budget action as of June 11th, 2020, and then the surplus or deficit amount by category, and then each category's appropriation as a percent of the total appropriation. And it's important to note that I use the Board of Ed's fiscal year 21 budget action as of June 11th, categorical appropriation amounts. And as you look further down on the page 2, it is due to those COVID-19 pandemic impacts that you mentioned in your opening statements. So it is for the FY21 budget, there were some atypical changes that the council was aware of, but that were made between the council's approved May 21st, 2020 budget to the Board of Ed's June 11, 2020. And that is where each category did have changes that were made, while the total appropriation remained the same. Of course, during a fiscal year, we do expect categorical transfers, and that is what we're reviewing now, the end of year transfer changes. But it was an unusual impact due to the COVID-19 pandemic that there were changes made between the council's approved at the end of May and then the Board of Ed's action in the beginning of June. And several, the reasons for these changes were due to several impacts on student learning, such as an increase in expenditures and the new continuity of learning approach, extensive summer instruction, additional student instruction and enrichment in non-traditional school hours, and professional development and technology initiatives for remote learning, as well as the receipt of substantial relief funding that MCPS received over the past fiscal year and from fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 21. So just keeping that in mind, I will dive into the FY21 operating budget transfer request, where due to deficits in 3 categories, there will be a transfer from 2 other categories that were in surplus to balance out the deficit. So the first deficit was in category 4, textbooks and instructional supplies, which was due to expenditures for technology, curriculum rollout, and other supplies related to the pandemic, such as personal protection equipment. The second was in the deficit in category 5 for other instructional costs, which were the result of expenditures for new curriculum, contractual service expenses for social emotional learning, school furniture, and graduation expenses. And the third was a deficit in category 12, fixed charges, which was overall due to an action taken to allocate additional funding or contributions to the MCPS employees trust fund, a group trust insurance trust fund, and the MCPS pension fund. And the additional funding addressed the costs associated with the deferred healthcare claims resulting from the pandemic. As I mentioned before, there were two categories that resulted in surplus that are balancing these deficits. The first is from Category 3, instructional salaries, where $62 million is being transferred, and then the second is Category 9, student transportation, for $5.7 million. So the transfer of surplus from those two categories will balance the deficit. And there are also surpluses in a few other categories, and while the majority were due to position, non-position, and lapse in turnover savings from salaries, a few were related to the. On page 3, I outlined them as well, but I'll go over them. Category 6, special education. There is increased savings related to students placed in non-public school withdrawn from MCPS due to the pandemic, in addition to some salary lapse and turnover savings. Category 9 is student transportation, decreased bus fuel costs due to schools operating virtually for the majority of the year, in addition to savings in non-position salary accounts. Category 10, the operation of plants and equipment due to decreased operations and facility usage that resulted in decreased spending for correctional services and maintenance supplies. And finally, Category 14, community services, there were savings related to programmatic changes. So that covers the FY21 operating budget transfer, categorical transfer requests from MCPS of the total $67.7 million. But I did want to note that the transmittal from the Board of Ed also included information on the fund balance. And so as of June 2021, MCPS projects that the beginning FY22 fund balance will be $2,185,852. And this is a result of the projected ending FY21 fund balance of $27,185,852 minus the $25 million that we allocated towards the FY22 budget. So then the second FY21 categorical transfer request is for the grant fund, and specifically the provision for future supported projects, which allows MCPS to access federal and state grant funds throughout the year that meet certain conditions. And this transfer is necessary to align the year's actual budget expenditures with the actual requirements of grant projects. On June 29th, the board approved the categorical transfer request for this item and requested this item as well from the council of a transfer of $1.7 million. And so those are the two categorical transfer requests from MCPS for one, the FY21 operating budget, and two, the FY21 grant fund. And council staff recommends approval of both the $67.7 million categorical transfer request and then the $1.7 million categorical transfer request for the grant fund.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Rodriguez-Hernandez. Mr. Clausing, I see you had unmuted. Go ahead and turn it to you before I turn to my colleagues for a couple questions.
Thank you, Chairman Rice and Council members Navarro and Jawando. I just wanted to mention at the start here that similar to what you mentioned, Chairman Rice, about construction, our operating budget is really a blueprint for the fiscal year. We start off the year with a plan, and as we know, we were operating in a virtual environment throughout much of the fiscal 21, the 2021 school year. And at the start of the year, when we formulated the budget, we did not know that we were going to go back into the classrooms on March 1. But clearly, as a result of the pandemic, we've had to make adjustments in that blueprint, sort of like change orders when you're building a building. And and the other thing to keep in mind, too, is that the deficits that we had in the categories that were mentioned, we had been reporting those in our monthly financial report to the board. We go through a very detailed fiscal or financial monitoring process in MCPS. And so we report each month to the board our projections for the year. And so those deficits really came on our radar at some point during the year, and those reports are shared with the council. So, we are trying to be as transparent as possible in our spending as we go through the year. Yvonne, if I've missed anything, please feel free to add to that.
No, I think you covered it. Thanks, Tom.
So with that, let me turn to my first colleague, Councilmember Jawanda.
Thank you, Mr. Rice, and thank you, MCPS, and to our staff. Just had a question. Obviously, we know this is atypical is probably an understatement of the type of year it's been, and we've all had to think on our feet and do things differently. So certainly understand that. One of the things that stuck out to me, though, and I wanted to just ask a little bit more about, was the special education change, in that we had parents. The stated reason here is that there was some savings because parents removed their children from MCPS and enrolled them in non-public schools, and that resulted in some change, in some surplus. As the dad of a special education student myself, obviously every parent was concerned about, is my child going to be able to get the right services remotely? How are they going to learn? And is there anything we can say? And if we don't have the right people, you can, I understand if you might need to follow up with me, but is there a plan to kind of analyze the immense challenges of virtual learning for all students, but particularly for our special education students, and how we're going to address that going forward, realizing that, God forbid, this may be with us from time to time. There are at least quarantines happening, and I think there's lessons learned. So we certainly want all of our parents to feel that no matter what their students' needs, they can be met within our system. And I know that's what you all do every day. But with the surplus money, is any of that going to go in to inform maybe improved strategies for kind of trying to address some of those needs? Hopefully that makes sense.
So if I may just, we will have to go back to our special education leadership to get some of that information for you. And I know we're working really hard on providing compensatory services for the special education students so that they can rise up, due to the learning loss that occurred as some of the virtual learning. So we can get back to you on that. I do want to clarify, though, that the savings related to the students placed in non-public schools, it was a result. It's those students that have very specific.
Just froze on me there.
We've had, before we started our meeting here, Yvonne's computer froze before. I think we had a power surge, and so
Speaking of the challenges,
she just stuck her head in. So I can assure you, Mr. Jawanda, we'll get back to you all after speaking with the special education folks. The benefit I have is Yvonne handled the special education budget from our office prior to her moving into the supervisory position. So you were speaking with the right person until her computer froze.
And it sounded like she was going to say, some of our students that have some significant challenges that needed to be met, they were moved. And so that the lion's share, but I still be interested in the question just in general, because if, I know there are compensatory services, making sure we have enough for that. Are we using federal, state money? So that's something we can follow up with at a future session. I appreciate that.
Yeah, most definitely. I know that some of our ESSER funding is being devoted specifically for that. So we're definitely doing what we can in that regard.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. No, great question. And certainly, so we'll look to get that information. If you can just provide that to the committee, that would be fantastic. All right. So committee, we have a recommendation from staff to approve the categorical transfers in the amount of $67,700,000 for the FY21 operating budget, and then $1.7 million in categorical transfers for the FY21 grant funding. Welcome back, Ms. Alfonso Windsor. Don't worry about it. It's okay. We got it. And Mr. Klausing subbed in well for you. So he did a good job. So that's what's before us. Is there any objection to the staff recommendation? Seeing none, all right, we have a unanimous vote on that. We will certainly follow up with regards to more information And also, one of the last things, just keep us apprised of what you're seeing when it comes to supplies, technology, all those kinds of things. As we continue to replace equipment, I know that there are not only time delays, but they're also talking about surcharges from what existing pricing has already been negotiated. So I'm very curious to see how that might be impacting you. I know from a construction side, it certainly is a huge impact on budget right now. And so we're having those kinds of discussions, but certainly am keenly aware of what's happening with our supply chains across the United States, across the world. And so from that standpoint, just want to make sure we're protected when it comes to any kinds of things that we may see that are beyond what we've already approved in our budget. And certainly just want to be aware of that. So if you could keep us posted on that too, that'd be great. Ms. Rodriguez-Hernandez, Ms. McGuire, anything else for us? All right.
I don't think so.
Well, as always, we are efficient here on the Education and Culture Committee. So thank you to my colleagues. Really appreciate it. Great discussion on libraries and great discussion regarding some of the categorical transfers. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned. Take care and have a great day. Stay safe, guys.